Good evening and welcome to a conversation with President of Howard University, live coming from the Mecca. You know, it's really important that we have our sorors and our brothers and certainly our friends who are here. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. Dr. Frederick is the 17th University President of Howard. Prior to being president, he was provost and chief academic officer. He's an alum of Howard, having received a BS and an MD at the young, tender age of 22. He's also received his MBA from Howard. He's been featured as one of America's best physicians by Black Enterprise and recognized as a super doctor by the Washington Post magazine. On behalf of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, welcome, Dr. Frederick.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. You know, when I think about Howard, I have a personal connection. My sister is an alumnus of Howard, being a class of 1988. I actually have a niece who's a graduating senior. And I have a young cousin who's more like a nephew, who's a freshman there this year. But, you know, when I look at Howard, Dr. Frederick, we all know the rich history of Howard, founded in 1867. You know, when you look at the history, it says that your university has awarded over 100,000 degrees. But I also know that when many of us from our community, when we think about Howard, we certainly think about the stellar reputation of the university. We think about the rich history of the university. We think about the storied alumnus who come from the university. But I also thought it was important that we kind of go to your website and look to see how Howard celebrates the university. And so if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you to indulge me because I did a little research just to kind of reflect on your university. It says that the university has long held a commitment to the study of disadvantaged persons in American society and throughout the world. The goal is the elimination of inequities related to race, color, social, economic, and political circumstances. As the only true, comprehensive, predominantly Black university, Howard is one of the major engineers of change in our society. Through its traditional and cutting-edge academic programs, the university seeks to improve the circumstances of all people in the search for peace and justice on earth. It goes on to say, Howard prepares men and women to advance social justice and the preservation of human liberty. In each of its 13 schools and colleges, Howard University seeks to develop technically competent and morally committed individuals. And so, Dr. Frederick, when I think about the varied alumnus who come through that university since 1867, and I know you have many that you're extremely proud of, but we also know that in this year, 2020, you have a very special alumnus, one who we've all gotten a tremendous amount of recognition and appreciation for, and that is the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. When you think about the alumnus who've come through your university, and you think about a Kamala Harris, ready to be the first female vice president, the first African-American vice president, the first African-American female vice president. And certainly for those of us in the D9 community, we're super excited that she's gonna be the first D9 vice president. But talk to me a little bit about the students who are walking on your campus today, thinking about the alumnus who've come through, but also thinking about a Kamala Harris. What does that mean to your university?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for, I think, going to the essence of who we are and why we're here. And I think what is the embodiment of the Howard experience. And yes, Senator Kamala Harris, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, is clearly represents the epitome of the excellence that we push, and that's what we want to see in our alumni. But we try to stick true to our motto, which is truth and service. What we encourage students to do is to come here to get the truth They have to go out in service of humanity to make the circumstances of the human condition better for every single human being. And that's what my alumni embody. And while people may focus in on Kamala Harris in this particular moment, the reality is that the 80,000 or so living alumni are doing that every single day. They're blocking and tackling in their communities, many of whom belong to your storied fraternity. And as you very well know, you are out epitomizing that brotherhood, that service that we think is so critical to the advancement of all of humanity, but certainly of people of the African diaspora. And so she is the epitome of that excellence in this moment, but certainly we embody that all of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And certainly when we think about our history, and I'll talk more about that on the backside, but when we think about our history, we think about our founders, we think about our initial intake class. The big thing that all of them represented was excellence. The big thing all of them represented was high academic achievement. And the other big thing they represented was strong moral character. And so when I think about a Felicia Rashad, when I think about so many who come through your university, they all reflected that kind of an image. And I love how you say, yes, we celebrate Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, and she's certainly heavy in the news. There are many students who come through your university that reflect that. And she talked about that as to one of the reasons she chose your university. Talk to me a little bit, if you don't mind, recognizing that you're a medical doctor, and certainly during 2020, there's been so much happening with the COVID-19 and everything that's centered around the pandemic. You think about you coming from the medical profession and understanding the level of impact that had on your student population, but the whole Howard community. Give me some insight on what that experience has been like for your university.
Yeah, it's been one of those things where, as you think of the moment and the time that we're in, Howard University was created for this moment and created for these times. The pandemic, the medical pandemic, the pandemic of racial injustice, the pandemic of the recession that disproportionately affects people of color, and to be quite honest, the pandemic of our democracy being called into question with an election that in and of itself produced, as you rightly mentioned, the first African-American female vice president. So you think of all of those things happening in 1 year, the reality still remains that Howard University has to be prepared for this moment and has to shine and step up in this moment. As a physician, I certainly recognize the medical issues related to the pandemic. But I've also had other experiences that have brought other issues home. I'm on the Federal Reserve Board of the 5th District, and looking at the impact of the recession and its disproportionate impact in our society is another aspect of this, that we have to be concerned about. I am friends with Senator Harris, and I have seen her up close and personal. And while we focus on her gender and her race, I hope what we will begin to quickly pivot to is her charisma, her intellect, and her experience and her ability to lead and do so in fine fashion as the 49th vice president, and do so in a fashion that the 48 white men who've come before her will probably see something new, and we'll see something new in a vice president that we can admire. And so, yes, it has been a difficult time and a challenging time, but institutions like Howard University were made for times like this.
Yeah, I really love your comment about so much attention and focus has been centered around her gender as well as her nationality. But the one thing that President-elect Biden said when he was in search for a vice presidential candidate, he wanted to identify someone who could take on the role on day one. And when you talk about intellectual capital, when you talk about charisma, all of us have witnessed her as she's really carried herself in a strong way in any kind of Senate committee hearing. as the Attorney General for the great state of California. She has always showcased her academic excellence and her strength. And of course, she gives a tremendous amount of credit for that development at Howard University. Last question just on COVID, and particularly when you think about what's happening within our community and how the virus has really kind of ravaged our community in a disproportionate way. And then you think, and we celebrate on yesterday, and we transition even more today with the vaccine being available. And now when you look at the data says that within our community, we probably are not as inspired to take the vaccine. So give me some insight onto your thoughts around certainly the huge impact it's had in our community, but it appears, at least today, our community might not be as excited about receiving the vaccine.
Yeah, so I think several things there to unpack. The first is that the pandemic has definitely disproportionately impacted our community, and we have to be realistic about that. That disproportionate impact has hit us in so many ways. One is obviously because of the comorbidities that we have in the frontline working status. But the reality is you also are going to have a secondary impact and maybe a tertiary impact because people were less likely to go and get preventative tests done, see their primary care physician, et cetera. We've already seen a decrease of about 80% in screenings for prostate cancer, colon cancer, et cetera, all of which disproportionately affect the African-American community. So there's a second wave to come. What has happened with respect to the production of these vaccines has been absolutely miraculous. In 10 short months, you had a medical community come together, scientific community come together in a collaboration to produce a vaccine in a way that we haven't seen. And just within this past hour, I actually got the vaccine myself. I operate on cancer patients, and therefore the risk is high. I myself have sickle cell, and I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I'm in the hospital almost on a daily basis. So I have significant risk. And so taking the vaccine was the absolute right thing to do. If our community does not take the vaccine in large numbers, what will subsequently happen is we will end up with a disproportionate outcome where the rest of the society would have taken a vaccine. We are disproportionately represented on the front lines. And so as the economy opens up and people start going to restaurants and movie theaters and so on, the people who are going to be serving them on the front lines will not have been exposed to the vaccine, would not have immunity, and therefore would more likely catch it, especially with increased activity. And again, we could have a double impact on the African-American community in the late spring. And that's why I think it is imperative right now for us to mobilize our community, for us to first let them know that the vaccine is safe. And second, for us to lead. So I'm not going to ask anyone to go do something that I didn't do myself just within the past hour. And then three, we've got to keep coming back and making sure that we hold the authorities feet to the fire to make sure they get that vaccine into our communities to make it available for our brothers and sisters. If we do not do that, we are facing a major crisis within our community that will go unheralded until we start seeing numbers of the impact. And you have to remember, these things affect generations. If you lose breadwinners in families, you lose support, those things have psychological impact, and it goes on and on. So generational wealth is impacted. Mental health and well-being today is impacted, and the ability to be productive and to make gains and excel are all impacted. So I think it is absolutely critical that we make a very strong push to get our community vaccinated.
I really love how you tie the scientific connection of the pandemic to the racial pandemic, the economic pandemic, and certainly the disparities that's centered around all. But I also think it's very important when you say we've got to educate our community because the lack of trust is there, but it's there for a reason. And we play a major role in enhancing that level of understanding so that as we move forward, when the vaccine becomes more available within the community and the opportunity is there, that our community rise up. We tend to rise up when we truly understand that our best interest, our vested interest is being taken care of. And I think as leaders in the academia, I think leaders within the medical profession, I think leaders within advocacy, and certainly government, which is always something that we don't always trust as strong, all of them have got to play a role in helping our community embrace this. Like you, I'm gonna make a little news today. I plan to take the vaccine as well when it's available. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's appropriate that as leaders of organizations that we set the stage, because I think the reality is if we don't, and I'm talking about don't take the vaccine, I think the negative is truly outweighed by the positive. And so I'm encouraged by that and look forward to even partnering with you with an opportunity to help educate our community. Last question, and we'll go into our close, and certainly appreciative of the time that you're giving us this afternoon. You know, again, we as a college-based organization, we spend a lot of time partnering with universities, really trying to understand the impact of COVID and what the transition looked like. We had to totally change how we went to market as we prepared for the fall of 2020. And we're doing something very similar as we prepare for spring 21. If you don't mind, talk to me a little bit about what you see as what the Howard experience is going to look like during the spring of 2021.
Yeah, we're going to primarily be online. We currently have our health sciences students on campus as they're doing clinicals. And so I have the opportunity every Tuesday and Thursday, I make rounds with them. On Friday, I'll be giving a lecture to another group of residents. So we do have some interaction. And I think especially in the middle of a pandemic that has disproportionately affected African Americans, it's an invaluable experience for those students to have. Unfortunately, with the case numbers rising and with distribution of the vaccine still not quite cleared as far as getting it to 80% of the population, it's still fairly unsafe. And then on top of that, we employ more African American faculty than any other institution. And since they're disproportionately impacted, my sacred obligation is to protect them just as much as I have to protect my students. And so that's what we're going to do in the spring. We'll largely be online, virtual. The health sciences students will continue to come back. We are bringing some more students back and housing them in an apartment building, students with housing insecurity, food insecurity, and students with other issues at home where either their lifestyle or something does not fit with their parents, and therefore they have domestic strife, as it were, in their own homes, and we want to bring them to a safe place. And so that's what we're going to do. During the spring, we will conduct a few in-person classes to test some of the things that we do have in place, including still using plexiglass and those types of things, because we plan on being back in full in-person by the fall of 2021. So in the summer, the students, especially the freshmen who will be rising sophomores who would have lost the opportunity to be on campus, if they want to take summer classes and come and stay in the dorm, we're going to try to open up those dorms to accommodate them and have them take their classes in the summer on campus. And we think that that could be a fun and different experience for them, that it will never replace the impact of the lost year in person, but we think it could certainly provide them with a different kind of orientation to our campus.
Okay, so for the most part, what campus looked like fall of 20 is similar to what it'll look like in spring of 21, but sound like you're going to do some testing and some modifications in preparation for the summer, but more importantly for the fall.
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
That's pretty encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Dr. Frederick, you know, here's what's important. You know, when I think about Howard University, it has a very special place within my heart. I talked to you about my sister. I talked to you about my niece, and certainly talked to you about Jay, who is that freshman you were just talking about. Jay is that freshman who kind of missed that experience this year and looking forward to it on next year. But you know, more than anything, I'm very fortunate today to represent over 250,000 brothers of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity. And Howard University has a special place in Phi Beta Sigma's heart. You know, it was January the 9th, 1914. 3 young men college students, and I always like to say this, Dr. Frederick, to our collegians, it was college students who founded Phi Beta Sigma. It was young men, not 57-year-old men like myself. It was young men who thought it was a need for something different, walking on your campus. And you don't get that experience nowhere else but Howard University. And so it was during our centennial year, 2014, that Phi Beta Sigma said, we wanted to make an investment in our Mecca that's referred to as the Mecca. We wanted to make an investment. And it was during that year that we made a commitment to create a $500,000 scholarship endowment. And when you think about our Alpha, January 9th, 1914, and then you think about our Alpha chapter on your campus today, the history and the legacy that was started 106 on the cusp of 107 years, the young men who are walking on your campus right now are reflecting the greatness of Phi Beta Sigma. How do I evidence that? The last 2 years, your university recognized our chapter as the Fraternity of the Year. Those young men are walking on your campus reflecting high academics, they're reflecting strong moral character, and they're reflecting the greatness and leadership that we champion all the time. And so when I think about the investment we've made, I think about the young men who are walking on our campus, and we think about the endowment that we've created. Our goal was to have that paid off in about another 3 years, and I'm excited to share with you today, we paid it out in its fullness 3 years early. And so, Dr. Frederick, on behalf of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, and on behalf of, I think I lost myself, on behalf of our general board, and again, the over 250,000 members, we're excited to make our commitment of our $500,000 paid in full now, and in a position to provide scholarships to young men walking on your campus, young people walking on your campus, and creating a legacy for another 100 years forthcoming. So super excited about the partnership and super excited about the work that we'll have an opportunity to continue to do.
Well, listen, I can't express my gratitude enough. I was the president at the time that pledge was made. And, a few things that I think it embodies. Like your fraternity, the scholarship and service that you instill in those young men doesn't come alive unless they bring it together as brothers. And that is evidenced by this type of support. 46% of my undergrad students who come here are Pell Grant eligible. And so we are actually providing an opportunity for those who otherwise wouldn't. And Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated has certainly written a very, very significant check, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of commitment, in terms of leading the way, in terms of what we need to do. We appreciate the dollars, let me be clear about that, but we also appreciate the support. We appreciate the mentorship. We appreciate the guidance that you've been giving to young men on our campus, and the fact that they have been growing into leaders of this generation. And this is going to be a golden generation. They have suffered through a monumental event in their lives. But with your support, with your guidance, and with your instruction, I think that they have been gilded for greatness. And that greatness, again, has been underscored by your commitment and your pledge. So on behalf of the university, I want to express my deep gratitude for your support and for your generosity, not just in terms of the dollars, but as I said, in terms of all the other things that you've done in support of the institution. And for that, I remain forever grateful. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for the leadership. We are always excited when students join our fraternity, always excited. But I will have to tell you, Dr. Frederick, what we're most excited about is the academic energy and effort that a Howard University pour into our members. We know that our members are a better Phi Beta Sigma man when they walk off of that campus and they've got that degree in their hand. We know that that student who's a Phi Beta Sigma man is a better position to provide excellent leadership within his community. And so we're very thankful for the partnership we have with you. We're very supportive of what you're doing with the students on your campus. And we want you to know we're going to be here with you for the next 100 years. And we look forward to the partnership. Thank you for sitting down with us this afternoon. Thank you for the excellent work that you're doing within the medical space. Thank you for the leadership and the academic excellence that you're providing on this very relevant, but if you don't mind, somewhat controversial subject that you're going to help lead our community through. And we look forward to partnering with you on that as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. There'll be another presidency on January 9, 2014, but that person, he or she will benefit certainly from this endowment as well. So thank you again. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Please stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. For those who tuned in, thank you for engaging us in this conversation. Thank you for your support of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, and also thank you for your support for Howard University. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.